Hello and welcome to another discussion of our featured vlogger's work. Our featured vlogger this week is the Uncultured Project, Sean Ahmed has used YouTube and other platforms to really have a massive impact in people's lives in India. We'll be uploading that video later today, but before we do, we thought we'd have a discussion about crowdsourcing. And the question we're asking is, can crowdsourcing save the world? Now, obviously, right now, crowdsourcing isn't going to save the world just yet, but it seems to have a huge amount of potential. It's a new thing, it's an exciting thing, and it wasn't possible before the days of mass collaboration and technology. So we have some people with us who work with crowdsourcing or have benefited from crowdsourced funding. We have Andrew from Spacehive, and Spacehive is a website that only crowdfunds public, space and civic projects. We have James from Please Fund Us, which is a website that crowdfunds creative projects. We have Andrew Wordsworth, who funded his low-carbon e-car project, raising £100,000 from 63 investors. And I believe we have Ariella Barker. Oh, sorry, we've got someone who's just joined the Hangout. Could you, bottom right there, who have we got that's just joined Hangout? We're not sure, just for the moment. But let's start with our first question. I'd like to ask Andrew from Spacehive, if that's possible. What is it about crowdsourced funding that's different from finding funding from, say, a bank or loans?
I mean, I think the main... Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, go ahead. Yes, I can, Andrew. Go ahead, go ahead.
Well, I mean, I think the thing with crowdfunding is that everyone gets what everybody wants. You know, I don't agree with you that crowdfunding wasn't possible before a lot of the technology revolution we've seen in recent years. You know, crowdfunding dates back to Victorian times. People used to take up public subscriptions for statues, for pieces of public art. And what we're seeing here is people using technology simply to do that same kind of thing. And the benefit with this, and what Spacehive.com allows, is for people that want to do things like micro parks, community centres, free Wi-Fi, things like that. Those have a public benefit. They're civic projects with a public good. And obviously, in the good old days, councils may have paid for these things. You know, grant bodies, charities might have been able to cover the costs. But obviously, people still need these things. People still need playgrounds for their kids. They still need community centres. They still want enhanced urban areas and parks and green spaces. And the vibe generally is that, you know, people will chip in cash for this. And the way that we've set up Spacehive is that people pledge money. They don't own a financial piece of the asset, but obviously they benefit from its existence. And the projects will, the people only get charged for the cash if the projects reach their funding targets. So what we're seeing here isn't something which is vying to replace banks or vying to replace traditional sources of funding. Indeed, you know, we are currently working behind the scenes with a couple of banks to look at match funding projects. But what we're seeing here is things alongside traditional forms of fundraising and really allow people to get what they want a bit more than they have done in the past.
Andrew Wordsworth, you funded a project yourself through crowdsourcing. Could you perhaps explain why you chose that avenue over, say, a more traditional means of finding funding for your project?
Yeah, I think we'd obviously looked at, because we went through equity crowdfunding rather than other types, we looked at sort of traditional angel investors and sort of early stage venture capital.
Andrew, sorry, could I just ask you to just quickly explain what your project was actually, just so people at home know what it is? Okay,
so eCar Club is the UK's leading electric vehicle only car club. So for people who are familiar with Zip Car, which is a sort of hire per hour car hire that's based in your sort of local area, we've done some very similar but with pure electric vehicles, and that allows us to offer the lowest emission vehicle car club in the UK. And we're looking to expand that. We're using the funding to expand that from a couple of sites, a couple of locations, across to sort of 10 or so through 2013.
So what was it about crowdsourced funding that was attractive to you?
Well, there were two things. As I said, we looked at the traditional areas, partly because of the kind of credit crunch and so on. A lot of those traditional investors are looking for much bigger investors, much more mature companies. But the second factor that drove us was we were getting asked by a lot of our members and our communities that we're working with how they could get involved. And of course, the great thing about crowdfunding is it allows very small investors, as well as some of the larger investors we've got who've contributed towards it, to get involved. So it's a quite good way to build our customer base and also raise money and expand our sort of network as well.
And how do you think it will change things now? Like, you've proved that this can work. You have a business that works. You funded it through crowdsourcing. So how do you think this is going to change, not just business, but many things within our society as we kind of progress further into the 21st century?
I think, I mean, we were quite sort of obviously pleased that we'd hit the target with 63 investors. I think the big thing is that the startups who are offering sort of equity and looking for sort of startup as businesses, have been restricted to sort of the hands of the few. You've got to go through brokers, you've got to go through quite a laborious process to get there. This offers for us has been an incredibly easy, very low cost way of raising that money and being given a chance, and as I say, allowing customers who are also the investors to decide, is your business worthwhile or not, rather than it being in the hands of what I might call the teenage scribblers who sit there and make those sort of decisions.
James, if I could speak to you, you're from Please Fund Us, a crowdfunding website that funds creative projects, not just civic ones. How do you think that the creative community have benefited from this kind of platform?
Well, it's been pretty amazing, just because, say, a theatre production company, they might have put on a couple of shows already, they've got a community that are already engaged with what they're doing, and suddenly it means that they can actually, like Andrew was saying, grow their customer base, grow the community, but get the funding for the next show that they want to do. And it's been sort of replicated across theatre projects, film projects. It can be someone putting on a festival, and so it's really sort of made the whole sector more dynamic and actually helped people get the marketing sort of boost before they actually get the thing going. So it's kind of, they've got the money up front, they've got the marketing behind it, and everyone knows that it's going to happen because they got the funding and the marketing. So it's helped enormously around the sort of the creative space.
Do you think that this kind of funding before you actually do the project might well alleviate some artists' fear about piracy and those kinds of concerns? What do you think about that?
I mean, in terms of the piracy, it's never great if you can, you put yourself out there and someone else is copying it. But the nice thing is that if you've done all the work before you've gone live with a project, then it's actually only up there for 30 days. And then you've got the funding, you've got the people behind you, and you've sort of made your declaration to the world that this is what you're doing. If someone were to copy it after everyone else has seen what you've been doing, it's a bit of a clear sort of copycat problem, and everyone knows that you've done it first.
If you're just joining us, we are talking about crowdsourcing and whether or not crowdsourcing can help alleviate some of this world's problems. So if you have any comments or questions, please do keep them coming in. I'd like to go to some of our late arrivals. Danae, I believe you're from Indiegogo. Could you perhaps explain what makes your platform, the way it works, interesting and unique? And also, one other point, please try and refrain from typing on the keyboards during the Hangout because it makes such a loud racket. But please, you go ahead. We cannot hear you. Sorry. If you could turn your microphone up and we will get back to you. I believe we have...
Can you hear me now?
Yes, there we go. Please do go ahead.
Okay. No, sorry. So Indiegogo got started actually back in January 2008 when we launched, which was...
We've lost that. Ningmaster Tom,
Hello.
could you please explain your experience of crowdsourced and crowdfunded projects?
Well, we have mostly raised money for charities and stuff. I don't think we've really done work towards specific goals. Like we've gathered money for the Uncultured project. Sean
Yeah.
didn't make it here today, but for the Uncultured project. But I don't think we ever like really work towards achieving certain goals like money goals or anything. But it's just the community contributing to getting stuff done, whether it's donating money to charity or to get Sean enough money to like build a filter in Bangladesh or build a school and it's way more personal than just donating money to charity, and you never know what happens to that.
So do you see, when you donate money to, say, the Uncultured project, which is this week's featured YouTuber, so stick around and we'll be uploading our feature about that later today, but when you donate money to Sean, do you see exactly where that money goes? Is that a big pull for this kind of funding?
Well, yeah, Sean makes videos and you really get to see what is being done with the money, not necessarily specifically with your $10, although a few years back, when it was certainly a smaller scale, I actually got a message from the Uncultured project, like, your donation, I don't know how much it was, your $10 or $20 went specifically to, we used that to buy, what was it, blankets for people or something, I don't remember what it was, but I actually got a message like, it's being used for that. But just in general, you get to see the video and you get to see more than a couple of pictures from what the charity is supposedly doing with their money. So it is way more personal.
Andrew from Spacehive, we mentioned earlier that this kind of funding has gone back since Victorian times, but surely the pull now is that when we donate money to these projects, be it a charitable project or a creative project, we can see exactly where that money gets spent. Do you think that's part of the attraction of this kind of model?
Yeah, I mean, I think with public space and civic stuff and creative stuff, it doesn't matter. It's all everything. It's all creative. It's not one or the other. I think the benefit with obviously the web and with smartphones and tablets is that people can track in real time where the money's coming from. They can look and see online who's giving what money. So if it's a corporate fundraising contribution from a big company, then they'll also get some exposure on there. And one of the first things that Spacehive has done in the UK, we've enacted a campaign with Experian, the credit analysts, the research company, and they are match funding a national campaign we're doing to crowdfund life back into town centres. So what we're doing is finding tons of projects across the country that are interesting, creative uses of space inside town centres, and the idea is that we can drive footfall back into troubled high streets by creating things like turning shops into hubs for entrepreneurs, beautifying the streets, so putting on festivals, filling empty shops in, and getting local artists involved. And Experian, obviously not short of a few quid, are chipping in. Initially, they've agreed to do £100,000 as a match fund, which will blocks of that will go into numerous projects. And the benefit for them is that obviously they get a lot of exposure through the press, through the local businesses that will see that. We've had a lot of coverage across the piece, and obviously ITN's getting on board with this. But I think the benefit is also that people have a buy-in to stuff. So it's not just simply about seeing it online, seeing it on a website. It's about the fact that when the thing is finished, you have an ownership of it. And I think as we've seen. As you've seen through the London riots last year, and a lot of the conversations that we have politically around community cohesion and what society looks like. One of the constant barriers we have is that people don't feel ownership over things. Everything's done for you in the UK traditionally. Everything is built for you by the state. And I think as a result, you don't quite have the buy-in that we do maybe in the States. And it's quite interesting to see that obviously Kickstarter pioneered a lot of the stuff in America, where people do have that sense of, right, we want something, we go and pay for it ourselves. And it has been certainly, from our point of view, it has been a little bit of a struggle getting people from particular parts of the establishment on board with this. But the genuine successes that we've had across the country with different things, we've funded everything from a micro gallery made from a phone box in Edinburgh through to an £80,000 community centre in Glencoch in South Wales. And the overriding theme across all of these projects, whether it's Wi-Fi or community centres, is that people have a buy-in. They see real value whether they've chipped in 10 quid or whether they've chipped in several £100s. And that, I think, is one of the fantastic, one of the best outcomes of this. is not just that stuff gets done, it's that stuff gets done that people want, and that people have a lot more buy-in to their communities as a result.
Andrew, it sounds to me like that what you're doing is, in a sense, replacing some of the things that government have traditionally done, things with civic centres and town centres, and getting more footfall into the town centre. So if that is actually a topic that you're interested in, we're having a debate about that on Thursday at 7 p.m. with Birgitta Johnsdotter, but that is for another time. Do subscribe if you're interested in the very things that Andrew's have been talking about, because we're talking about it more on Thursday. But do keep your comments coming in, because we will be able to ask some of our panel any questions or queries that you put up onto the YouTube channel. But I'd like to go to Danae and ask if we can hear you. That would be great. I want to ask, who do you think the crowd-sourced funding platforms threaten the most? I mean, traditionally people have gone after banks to get money. Is it possible in the future we'll just go to platforms such as Indiegogo? She's gone. She's gone.
I don't think they're threatening
She's
people.
back.
I mean, I think that seems a bit of a sensationalist
Yeah.
statement. I don't.
Well, Andrew, what I mean by threaten, I don't mean like a scary terms of threaten, but we've seen how the internet has changed many industries hugely, and you might expect that people have always considered that loaning and getting money and applying for money for your business has always been the territory of the banks. Is it not possible that crowdfunding might in the future replace that kind of system? I wonder if
I think
the lady who's just joined us from Indiegogo might have an opinion on that.
As I said earlier on, I don't think it's one or the other. I think, a lot of the stuff that is done through crowdfunding wouldn't be financed through
Danae, Danae, can I go to Danae? Do you have an opinion on that?
I think every time I try to add the microphone, guys, I lose you, so I might lose you again. But can you repeat the question?
But the question is, will crowdfunding replace banking in the future for people applying for money for their projects, be it creative or for their business?
No, we actually believe that crowdfunding is becoming a permanent piece and complementary piece of the entire financial ecosystem. Simply because it's providing an incredible incubation platform for projects to get off the ground. So traditional financiers, from banks to angel investors to even foundations or governments, to even the creative labels like studios and music labels that are all, quote, traditional financiers, are actually thanking us very much for creating and pioneering crowdfunding. Because it's becoming this platform where projects are gaining this community validation and making their jobs easier to decide which projects they want to amplify. A great example of this is a civic project, actually, on Indiegogo. A blogger by the name of Matt Inman was really passionate about preserving a museum in the name of Nikola Tesla, a scientist that he thinks was underrepresented in the history books. And so his old lab was up for sale, and he wanted to take his old lab in New York and turn it into a museum. So he went to the New York State government here in the U.S. To convince them to do that, and they said, well, we're not sure if this is something that people actually want, and as the government, we're supposed to only spend money on things that people actually want. So what he did is they struck a deal where he said, if I raise $150,000 from the people, New York State government, will you match it? And they said yes. So that's what they did. They went on Indiegogo, and Matt raised $1.3 million from the people in support of this museum, and then the government came in and matched it with another $850,000. So that's a great example of how crowdfunding is providing this incubation platform and validating an idea so that traditional financiers can come in and amplify the efforts.
Andrew, if I could go to yourself, Andrew Wordsworth, sorry. Could you describe what kind of people invested in your project, and what did they expect back from that investment?
Okay, we had quite a real sort of mix. We talked about some of the advantages we had. About the top 10 of our investors probably invested about 80% into the business. Obviously, we went through sort of the equity crowdfunding route with Crowdcube, and I mean it's probably quite typical of their investor mix. I think they've got about 30,000 investors, but those guys are basically bringing a lot of the advantages that the traditional angels. I mean, they're in for sort of over £10,000 each, and and they're actually bringing quite a lot of the. We've already had offers of, I've got contacts, I can help you guys out. Again, people really believe in the car club, and they've put their own money to work. It's not as though they're investing from a fund or something like that. This is there's a lot of passion in that. But that goes all the way down to the smaller guys who invested. The lowest investment was £10, which is basically a commitment from community members and areas in which we're operating. So it's a bit sort of horses for courses. But again, I think the great thing about crowdfunding is there's nowhere else you can get that kind of mix and that kind of broad access that's really going to help the company going forwards.
And what would you say to someone who maybe right now who's watching this at home who has a project who, for them, it's a difficult thing to get funded? Do you think it's something that people should get involved in or try out?
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about this, that so obviously we looked around a whole number of these crowd things, and very simply, if people are, have got even a sort of £1,000 in the bank, it's not earning any interest. There's no way they can get access. I'm talking about the equity thing in particular. They can get access to these sorts of projects, but they can basically put, £10, £15, maybe pick 10 companies that they like. And when we talk to a lot of the investors who've invested into us, this is what they're doing. They can get access to those companies. They can get involved in them. And it's a lot more interesting. They broaden their risk, and they're going to earn more than the 0.5% they're getting in the bank as well.
Okay, I'm going to ask one final question that I'd all like you to kind of have a think about and answer briefly, if you would, as we begin to wrap this up. How do you foresee that crowdfunding is going to change our future, and why do you think that people should get involved? If we could start with you, Andrew, from Spacehive.
Well, there was a Nesta report which came out just before Christmas, which predicted, I think it was about 14 billion to be raised globally via crowdfunding by 2015, which is an astonishing amount of money. And I think, as I've mentioned, and has been mentioned by one of the other panelists, what we're seeing here is that crowdfunding won't be used just to bring ideas together or bring new financing together, but it will also be used to amplify ideas, create more noise for fantastic innovations, and and it will also bring government and corporates together. And what we're doing at Spacehive.com is a few big projects that are bringing in corporate backing. But what we're also seeing as well, and you asked the question before, are we replacing what councils are doing? And to some extent, people may view it as such. But what we're also seeing is that councils are getting involved. So we are doing a few partnerships with councils up and down the country where we are putting ideas online, and if the councils see that they are popular and thus potentially will win them votes, they will chip in cash. We're in discussions with a very big city in the UK at the minute about that. And crowdfunding will be a way that people can obviously find financing for projects, but also tap into money and contributions that you'd never get from banks, because banks will only contribute to stuff where there's minimal risk. And obviously with a lot of the things you do through crowdfunding, they are indulgences. Not everything has a real virtuous aim. Some things are just simply because people want to put on a gig, or they want to have a show of some kind, and I think it's great that these things can be shared online, and I think what we will see is that technology will make that even easier. And
James from Please Fund Us, what are your thoughts on this? How will crowdfunding change our worlds, and why should people be involved?
Well, so we're already seeing a backdrop of government austerity, funding cuts for the creative space, and so we've already seen a huge pickup of all these people who are basically empowered to set up their own project without their own money. These are people that previously might not have got the finance that they needed to get going with their company, the finance needed to get their theatre project off the ground. And these might be people that would have applied for a government grant on something. And actually, that's one of the big things, is actually it's completely fair. If someone can get 1,000 people to support what they're doing, or 100 people to support what they're doing, and that's where the money's come from, it's not because they got a friend in the government or a friend on the local council or whoever it is. It's because people want it to happen. They're willing to part with small amounts of cash to actually be involved in the project. And it makes a massive difference. Then in terms of the spaces that it's sort of going to be changing, I mean, there's one company that's already doing renewable energy crowdfunding projects, and that, again, is sort of working on the basis there's a government subsidy, but they can help get the returns from the renewable energy project because they need 1,000 people to sign up to make it worthwhile to get the development going. You've got Crowdcube and Seeders sort of revolutionizing the equity space, making it possible to get 20 grand to 100 grand investments, which previously weren't possible. And I think it's just going to be changing all sorts of different places. You might find that it starts enabling people to buy houses together. You know, we've already got shared ownership. It's already working in the community space. Spacehive are doing a great job making lots of community centers possible. And then in the creative space, it's already worked. It's already happening.
Andrew Wordsworth, you funded renewable energy or a clean energy project through this. Do you think that we'll see more of that in the future?
I think we were certainly one of the first in the UK to go down the crowdfunding route. I think providing they are consumer facing and things that people believe in, I think there will be a big development. I think the more tech end, where people don't understand, it's a sort of a component for some some engine or something like that. I think people have to relate to the product, and I think that's the same whether it's creative arts, whether it's a space project, a civic space project, or a charity project. Certain types of things will be funded, but I do think it's going to. I know there's a debate about is it seen as a threat. I think it is. It feels like the early days of the sort of .com era when the internet was actually opening up traditional structures. I think it's going to take time. But I think we're just on the cusp of something really exciting happening. I think we've only just seen the beginning of this.
Danae, what are your thoughts on this? How do you think crowdfunding is going to change our future?
It's already changing our future. I guess when we set out to start Indiegogo 5 years ago, we believed that in a world where people would get funding based on how hard they work, how much their audience cares, not based on who you know or if you have a lucky connection to the government or a bank, etc. And what's happening is we're creating is this level funding playing field, essentially, where anybody with an idea can meritocratically build themselves up and get the exposure and the interest and the attention that they need to actually make their idea a success. So from a future perspective, what I see things like the banks offering crowdfunding as a product in their whole product suite. I see the government requiring or integrating crowdfunding into how they allocate their tax dollars. For example, I see a day when you submit your taxes online and then you're given a pop-up screen. Where do you want your tax dollars to go? Parks and Rec, social services, etc. I see a day when crowdfunding truly empowers people to fund things in the moment that they want it funded. So you're driving along, you cross over a pothole, and all of a sudden you get a notification that you can fund that pothole if you want to. So it's changing the life. It's going to be part of our kind of day-to-day fabric, and the reason being is because it's actually making everybody's lives better. It's bringing the ideas that the people want to see come to life actually coming to life. So we're empowering the people of the world to fund the things they want to see funded, and we're removing any excuses for ideators or creators around getting their ideas off the ground. So before you could always say, I have this brilliant idea, but I don't have the money or I don't know the right people, so I have to give up. But now you have no excuses because you have all the tools at your fingertips to actually make it happen. And then the last thing I would say is, one of the things that you asked earlier, what makes Indiegogo different, is that we built this system to be global from the beginning. We're in over 200 countries and 4 currencies, 3 languages. And we're an open system where anybody can create a campaign, no matter wherever they are. Again, back to our belief that anybody should have. We don't believe it's our right to decide who has the right to raise money or not. So everybody should be included. And so, in terms, the reason we built the system that way is because we fundamentally believe that we're becoming, global citizens. The concept of country barriers are going away. People who have businesses online, their customers are everywhere. People who have a passion or a mission in life to change the world, they have followers and fellow activists everywhere. So by eliminating borders, we can actually make true global ideas come to life.
Danae, thanks for that. If you are interested in this idea of governments being able to run themselves using this kind of technology, we're going to be having a debate about that on Thursday at 7 p.m. But I'd like to go to Tom. Finally, what are your thoughts on how you see the future changing thanks to this kind of technology?
Well, it's empowering that people can contribute, and there is no limits, no bar as to how much they need to contribute initially to be involved in a project. So they can just spare change that they have lying around, they can donate anything, and they can help out the project, and indeed they can see what is being done with the money. Nerdfighters is also very active on Kiva, the financier organization, and they have lent over $1 million. I'm pretty sure we're well on our way to the loan over $2 million. So that's quite a lot of money. But like for charities, people do not really need to be donated money. I mean, if you just lend them money, they can help themselves out as well, and people can choose what they give their money to. Like they purchase credit on Kiva, and they can just choose their own projects which they want to help fund, and the payback rate is really good. So it's empowering.
Thank you very much to all of our contributors for our discussion today. Thank you to everybody watching. A shout out to Toxic Films, who's watching this on his iPod Touch with everybody at school, and Spongy Frogs, who's also noticed we have a new channel design which he likes. If you like this debate today, hit subscribe, because we do these on Tuesdays. We also have a big debate on Thursdays. The topic for this Thursday's debate is, can we govern ourselves with digital technology? And there's been a lot of crossover here with some of the ideas we've heard here today. So if you're interested in this, you'll definitely be interested in Thursday's debate. We shall see you then, and thank you to everybody who's taken part. Thanks for your time, guys. We'll see you again next time.
Yes.
Cheers.
Bye.
Cheers.